Yes.
She just turned 88.
Wow.
And she's just starting her second career. She's got all kinds of powerful information to share with us. And she's just beaming. I couldn't stop her talking.
Yeah.
she's really something. So anyway, one thing that really struck me that she said is that the older you get, you have to get rid of the ego. And one thing, in so many words, that keeps you young is actually living in the now. Is doing what you need to do now, not putting it off and when I get, and then you get too old and you don't have the energy to do it, and you shoulda. Now. So anyway, that's the main stuff. She's just written a book, and they're doing all kinds of information on her and projects on Sister. So we met about 4 months ago.
Yes.
After a sacred space, actually, the one that the Sister Geneva did, that was the astrologist.
Yes.
And we ended up going to an event over at in West Oakland afterwards. And so then Sister was just overflowing with energy and love and knowledge. So I just want to welcome Sister Jerri Lange.
Thank you very much. Of course, we all know where the energy comes from.
Yes, absolutely.
I was talking to Lola last night, right on the phone, and I said, you read different things from the book according to the people you're with and what they care about. And I thought, instead of talking about all the different, I've interviewed all the, Sammy Davis Jr., Shirley MacLaine, they want to know what Rock Hudson said or whatever. I just thought that isn't the main thing. I thought what we would talk about here today. We can talk about some of the people I've interviewed, Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison. But the important thing right now is that people are killing each other in the streets. And a man I was on the phone with, as a matter of fact, for an hour, is that he's down in Texas, a young man, a senior citizen really that we used to know. But they're organizing a national people that used to be in Oakland, and he lives in Texas. And everyone's concerned about what's happening in Oakland. So he was telling me a review of what he's planning. He's planning a national movement almost, because they declared this. They're getting ready to call the National Guard out here in Oakland, and I don't know if all of us know how serious it is, but it is very serious. So I thought that the one thing that you would want to know about is two things. I thought you would be interested in. What growing up in Oakland was like when I was young. I think it gives you a perspective of what they have destroyed for us. They have destroyed our community. And when you destroy the community, the shooting starts. Because you don't know who was anybody, you didn't grow up, the mother looked after you, and nobody looks after anybody, they belong in a gang. And it's difficult. So I thought I would start with a part of my introduction, and then go from there into growing up in Oakland, a little bit of that. And how much time do I have, by the way?
Oh,
I just want to know what you think about it.
30 minutes, 30
half hour.
Yeah,
I can read quite a bit. And then I would go from there into some of the struggles I had when I got into media and found out what they were and were not doing. And what was really scary was how much subliminal damage is done to people through the commercials. You don't even know about the hidden symbols. And a lot of people have written books on them way back from the 1940s and 50s. We've known that we have been programmed by things that are invisible. They hit the subconscious mind. But you see, the problem with black people is we do not read. We come from a spoken word, which was our history. But when you're dealing with Europeans, their whole thing is reading. And so they have a joke. They say, well, if you want to write a secret that black people won't ever see, put it in a book. So the point is that we have to begin to realize we did start with the hieroglyphics, but we didn't take it on to the linear age, and we have to understand that wasn't our tradition. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. We don't read. We do other things that other people can't do. But one of the things we need to learn to do if we're going to save ourselves, we've got to read books. People all over the place, C-SPAN, and everybody's writing their story now because they feel like we're in the last days, and and they want to get in good with God, I think, because there's some real tremendous confessions coming out, particularly from the banking industry, the people that took the homes. Well, people are coming forth, bankers, and telling the fact that they've got to be regulated. So we're in a different thing, and if you haven't noticed, people don't read the business page. The New York Stock Exchange has been sold. They sold it off. Now that's not Goldman Sachs or anybody. That is the mother of all of these banks is selling itself off to someplace down in Atlanta. They aren't even selling it to somebody else. You see? Now when you see those things, if you don't read the newspaper, and somebody said, well, why read the business section? I haven't got any money invested anywhere. But let me tell you, your destiny is written in the business section. You see, a lot of stuff is in the business section. So sometimes you have to read things you don't think are interesting. They're dry, they're not always, you can't always, and when we do read, we read fiction. Well, who needs fiction when the reality is stronger than that? I mean, and certainly affecting our lives. So I wanted to do some of the things that I found subliminally happening in media. The fact, number one, did you know that when you look at a television screen and you see the trains are running and the airplanes are flying and people are running and moving around, you think your eyes are moving around. Well, people don't realize when you move your eyes, when you read from here and right? Do you read that across the page like that? Your eyes move when you're reading. It pumps blood to the brain. Now, if you don't read about the fact that that happens, then you look at television, you think you're moving your eyes with those figures. When you go home tonight, watch, your eyes don't move. Your eyes are looking at one thing like that, and it's the easiest way I know to become a robot. And you're not pumping blood to the brain. Now, put two and two together. Just a few years ago, they said we never even heard about Alzheimer's. Anybody hear about Alzheimer's? We hadn't heard about Alzheimer's. And it came up all of a sudden. Now they're saying, oh, they're going to get it younger, 50,
Exactly.
60. Now, then you have to start saying, what has taken place that would cause us to have something where our brains are, the cells in our brains are dying? You're no longer pumping blood to the brain because you don't read anymore. You're looking at a tube. And so if the blood doesn't go to the brain isn't fed, and therefore, voila, they'll never admit it. I'm sure it has something to do with Alzheimer's. And what I'm saying is if you read, you begin to put it together yourself. And there's a lot of information out there that you begin to just get just from soaking it up. But the most dangerous thing in your home is your television. And I hate to say that because you have to watch either PBS or C-SPAN to even get anything decent. Everything else is on. You've seen the input of the sexual acts now. Every time they kiss, they got to open their mouth and put the tongue in the mouth. All of that. Then you got to have our dancers out there. We got 8-year-old girls emulating our dancers, grown dancers. I'll tell you how they're dancing. And they got these mothers egging them on because they're telling them you're going to make a lot of money, which is setting their kids up. I have a son in Hollywood, and I didn't even want to tell you about what's going on down there. But it is just. But thank God his father was in the business, so we knew what to tell him to watch out for. So most of these kids that take those drugs, as you hear about these kids going crazy and Charlie Sheen and all that stuff, it's because they are put through the ringer down there. And they look, there's a high price that you pay to be a star. Let's put it that way. But everybody's drawn to it. But these are the things you have to warn your children about, because we were not encouraged to live. We were encouraged really to die since slavery. And we have to understand that if you're going to save yourself, if you want to be saved, you're going to have to save yourself. And you do that by reading. So I want to impart to you some of my experiences as a woman and in the media, and then I'll skip over to different parts so that you'll get an overview, and then we'll do a Q&A. So if you want to ask any questions, I'll do it. This is the part of the introduction of my book. Until the events of September 11th, 2001, what was happening around the world seemed irrelevant to most Americans. As long as it did not affect the stock market or our daily lives, it did not register on our radar. We live inside a cocoon of comfort that fails to see the pain and suffering of others, even those in our midst. This book begins with the story of my life as a black woman in America, similar to millions of other black women in this country. You won't find us on the news because if you're black and not in trouble, you're not news. You won't find us on any sitcoms either You have to be larger than life to make that cut. So if we live our lives without incident, raise our children, pay our taxes, and contribute to society as best we can, you may never know us at all. We have been living below your radar for almost 300 years. Your view of us is what you read in the newspapers, watch on television, or see in the movies. Television is a medium through which we can begin to understand each other, and we need to break out of the little boxes created for us by a mass media determined to keep people in their place. They're so much easier to control. But events are happening so fast around us that we no longer have the luxury of not knowing our neighbors. The world has become a dangerous place where not knowing your neighbor can cost your life. I wrote this in 2005. Let's see what's happening. If September 11th taught us anything, it should be that reaching out and trying to understand another point of view is a good starting place on the road to freedom and democracy that we keep declaring our allegiance to. Television cannot solve all the problems, but it can begin the dialogue. In my career as a broadcaster, I would meet and interview many different people, from military generals to Hollywood stars, from the radical left to the conservative right, and travel halfway around the world to the wedding of a king. My world would always be one of conflict, bridging two worlds, one black and one white. The mythology of contrast between light and dark, night and day, yin and yang, good and evil, reaches its apex in the lives of those born black who must live in a white world. Like the flight of the phoenix, each time a match is put to our dreams, we must rise from the ashes. With each rising, there are bitter pills to swallow and lessons to be learned. But somehow that's true of us all, for we all stand before the door of time at that very special moment when we wait to enter a new place, listen to a different drummer, or experience another world. I bid you open this door and enter mine. I have pictures of my grandparents. This is my grandmother from New Orleans. My father's a Buffalo Soldier over here. This is my mother, Laura, my sister Phyllis. There were actually 4 siblings. It's my brother Stan Wilson, the folk singer that helped start the Hungry Eye when it was in San Francisco, and worked over with, I forget the guy's name, what's our Italian's name over there that ran the Hungry Eye. Anyway, I know that name, I can't think of it at the moment. But anyway, this is a picture of Ted, Michael. This is my husband, who was also from New Orleans and an actor, but he did a lot of plays, but he also did Shakespearean and serious plays, and he graduated from Tuskegee. Oh. Yeah. This is my son, the baby, who's it is 55 now. Oh, he's a businessman, James. And Scott Newhall, executive editor, wrote a beautiful introduction to my book. And he was my boss for 3 years, and he ran the Chronicle, and he was became one of my mentors and very dear friends. This is when I worked in the mayor's office, Jack Shelley. This is when I lectured at Stanford in the graduate communications department. And this is me, in going back to Berkeley High School, telling the kids and laughing with them, saying, you know what they told me when I got to the counselor with the grades to go into UC Berkeley? The counselor said, well, Jerry, you have you have the grades to get into UC Berkeley. Of course, that's all in here. And she said, but there's really nothing for your people, and you don't really have the money to go there. So why don't you just go work at the Naval Supply? It was wartime, 42. Go in and make money, and you can help your parents. And I was laughing at him, telling me that's what they used to tell us. They said, Ms. Lange, don't laugh. They're still counseling us that way. And that was that was been in the 50s and 60s when I went back to school. So anyway, I'll just read a little bit about my background, because I know it's like your background is much like yours, and much like everybody's going to kind of, we all see ourselves in this, because we all came kind of from that same root, you know. Our family history begins in first I've got to read, this is very important. I left out this one little thing I wrote in here, and I was hoping that people would get it. Let's see, it'll be up here. Before I read this, I want to, just a moment. It sounds unimportant, but it's a very important thing I put here. I put it in black letters to say this is important. And I'm quoting another writer. We assume that our familiar senses give us a complete picture of our environment, but nothing could be further from the truth. We are stone deaf and colorblind in a universe of impressions beyond our range of senses. Arthur C. Clarke, he wrote that back in 1967, Profiles of the Future. Who reads a space scientist? You know, he did all these other futuristic things. He's a futurist. And you say, well, what has the futurist got to tell me? He's got plenty to tell you. So I put that there so people would realize that nobody's life is what it appears to be. It's always something else. Mm-hmm. Our family history begins around 1820 in the southern town of Anniston, Alabama. It was there that many escaped slaves found their way to refuge with Indian tribes. They intermarried, learned the Indian way of survival, lived closer to nature, and raised their families. On my father's side, my grandfather was one of those escaped slaves. My grandmother was a Seminole Indian. Most of the Indian tribal lands scattered throughout the South became places where escaping slaves could disappear. All over the South, these tribes rescued black slaves who were running from the white masters. Today you will find millions of blacks with Indian blood running through their veins. The Seminole Indian tribe was especially unique because it was the only tribe never captured or put on a reservation. The Seminoles were fiercely protective of their wives. Their leader was a fierce warrior called Osceola, who evaded capture until his wives were kidnapped and held on a nearby military base. When Osceola went to negotiate the release of his wives carrying a white flag, he was captured and placed under house arrest. He died in 1838 at Fort Moultrie. The Seminoles risked their lives to live in the Okefenokee swamps with Florida with alligators and poisonous snakes, rather than live on reservations. The children of these marriages of escaped Africans and recalcitrant Indians were a special breed. There was no memory of long-term captivity in their blood. They had risked lives and limbs for freedom, and although they came from different cultures, they had much in common. They could not live under the domination of the white man. My father was a runaway. His father was a runaway slave, Indian mother. Our Indian family name was Snow. He told me that on his deathbed. Mm-hmm. He wanted me to know, all of us to know what our real name was.
S-N-O-W?
S-N-O, like snow.
Snow.
Yeah, like the snow park over there. I keep saying hi, ancestors, when I go through. But the snow, that was our, and then I finally visited Anniston, Alabama, and everybody in the town was named Snow. Yeah. Oh, I swear to God. And the mayor was a woman, Mrs. James B. Snow. I said, Mrs. James B. Snow, I want you to know one of your relatives, one of your bloodline is on the Love Boat, and she loved it, and she didn't know about that. But anyway, they were very kind, and the whole town was mostly Indians. They called it Anniston, Alabama, but actually it's another town called, I think it was called Baker or Button. It starts with a B. I have the name at home, but it's a small little town. They always say they lived in the main town, but then the Indians and all blacks had to live outside of Anniston. It was loaded with, as a matter of fact, the Stone Mountain was around there, so the Ku Klux Klan would own that whole town. So you were not allowed to live in the town. So if a black person said in Anniston, Alabama, he's really from this tall little, small little city that's cut out for them. Anyway, my father told us about our history, and it was, again, the Seminoles were a mixture of Creek Indians and blacks through intermarriage, and no wonder none of us would ever be comfortable on a plantation, be it the classic one in the South or the many forms it would take in the North. We were all loners. It ran deep in our blood and in the blood of our ancestors. My father's family settled in Alabama. One day when my grandfather was away and my grandmother was at home with the children, two white men entered the house and started to rape her. Mm-hmm. My father remembered her saying, "Please, not in front of the children." Oh. These two white men put gunny sacks over the head of each child and continued with the assault. So you already know a gunny sack, you might as well, you can see right through that. So there was about 8 children, I think, in that house. My father never got over the incident and later ran away from home at the age of 14. I believe he ran to other relatives he knew by the name of Wilson, because we had that name, but he wasn't even sure that